Hey, it's Larry. Welcome to Starting the Wealth Transfer. I had a conversation about, when the dinar is going to go and what that's going to look like, and what a younger guy's half my age, about 30, what he's going to do, when the dinar happens. And he's a young guy in ministry, not traditional ministry, but he does sports ministry. And he's full-time missionary, really. And he asked me about if he could share his plan, what he was going to do when the dinar went. And I said, yeah, let's go. He goes, I think it's going to happen this fall. And when it does, he said he was going to do a tithe, and then he wanted to give away others beyond that. And I said, well, would it be better for you to give away cash now or a monthly stipend later? What's going to have a bigger impact? And he talked about how he wants to set up a separate amount from his dinar. He was talking about approximately a quarter of it, which I thought this was a really good idea. He wants to have a separate account, a separate crypto account, and even a separate bank account where he wants to manage that money to then forward it to missions and different things that he cares about. But he said, I also am going to take as much as it takes. And he said, I owe under 200 on my house, and I just want to get my house paid off. And so I said, hey, I really have a different opinion about that. And I want to talk about that. And I want to talk to you about it. There are so many prophecies by Kim Clement that talk about how there's going to be debt forgiveness. And a lot of people believe in Nasera and Josera. And it's so interesting that Kim Clement doesn't call it that, but he essentially describes it the same way. And he talks about how there's going to be debt forgiveness basically the year after in the second year of the wealth transfer, in the middle of the summer between June and July, there's going to be debt forgiveness. And so I said this to my friend. I said, why would you take nearly $200,000 and throw it against debt, which if there is debt forgiveness later, I don't know that you're going to get that back. I don't know if you will or you won't. I have a whole bunch of debt. I have over $10 million worth of debt, and I'm not worried about it because I still have low interest rates for another couple of years. Relatively low. I mean, I roll them, so that they're okay. And I don't want to rush to pay those things off. I'd rather invest in, wealth transfer things. And then I think there's going to be forgiveness of that debt as well. Now, I don't know if you think like that, but here's what I would like to ask your help. I'm struggling as I think about, writing this next book, and I want it to be impactful. I want it to make a difference. I feel like the thing that's going to make the most difference is I do think there's key financial areas that might be beneficial, but I feel like what I really want to do, and I'm open to your ideas how to do this, of how to have a network of mentoring relationships. I want to share this idea that I have that I think is biblical, because I feel like, our culture is not inherently kingdom culture. And I think that we need to be intentional about what God is calling us to kingdom culture. And I'm going to talk to you about this idea that I feel like I'm supposed to write about, but there's really 4 ways that you live out your faith. And I think you need to be very intentional about each one of these things. You need to be intentional with your friends. You need to be intentional with your family. You need to be intentional with your work. And you need to be intentional with your community. And that really kind of involves, church and everything else. And I want to make an argument, and I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but I've been thinking about it. But I feel like Western culture does not do a good job, and I don't understand women exactly, but so I'm more of an expert in men men's relationships, but basically men do not do very well in relationships after, I'd say, 40 years old. There's very few men who have made a new significant relationship in the last year if they're over 40. And if they're over 50, they haven't made one in the last 5 years. And if they're over 60, they just don't make them. That's almost always true. The older you get, the more men stick together with their old friends. And I have an idea that I think is pretty controversial, but I think it might be true. And I want to know what your thoughts are, because I want to think about what it was like when Jesus pulled his disciples aside and think about what that did to their friendships. Because I really think that we don't think enough how much other people influence us. And I think we need to be so intentional about who does influence us. And if you were a disciple and you were invited by Jesus to be one of the 12, he basically said, hey, come and hang out with me. And they didn't know how long, I don't think it was going to be, but for 3 years, we're just going to hang out together. We'll eat fine. We'll have community possessions. Some of you have family, some of you don't. But I want you to come and be friends. And so what do you think that did to the caliber of their friendships? They were extremely intentional with their friendships. And they lost all kinds of other people's influence on them. And what I feel like what we should do as believers is, if we have a positive influence on somebody else, I don't think that we let that go. We continue to influence those. But if there's anybody who doesn't have a positive influence on us, and sometimes it's easy if whoever you think the beautiful people are, whatever that means to you, sometimes there's ego that is fed when we get to hang out with the people that are good for our ego to get to hang around. But are those people actually drawing you closer to God? Are they making your life better? Because I think that you should go way out of your way to be intentional with your relationships. And you need to put yourself around people who are going to encourage you, into great things. And I think you need to go to great lengths to separate yourself from people who are not encouraging you to do good things. They're not encouraging you to do godly things. They may encourage you to do ungodly things, or they might encourage you to do really ungodly things. But those are not the people that you need to hang out. I think that I'm coming to the conclusion that if you want to lead an intentional life, you upgrade your friends as often as you can. And that sounds so horrible, because I think there's something in our Western culture where we want to have our long-term friends. When we have a good influence on them, I don't think we always are loyal to those who will listen to us, and I feel like we've got a Christian obligation. But for those that we don't influence and they influence us in a negative way, I think we're way better off just to move past it. And it's hard and it's difficult to do it. But think about what Jesus did for the early disciples, and I think that that's what we should do. The second thing I'm just going to do quickly now, the other three areas about family. I feel like you only have so much family, and you have to be extremely loyal. And it was really interesting that Jesus made these verses, and I don't have them in front of me, so I'm not going to be able to say them, but he basically, like, if your family is pulling you away from the kingdom, then you need to draw a line in the sand and not let your family pull you away from the kingdom. But I also feel like we have to be fully committed to our family. And I think there's so many Christians who get offended, and they just don't, they feel justified in not maintaining a good relationship with their family. And I think sometimes people get offended at their spouse. I think many people get offended at their kids, and they just think, those people, they're my family. You don't get to choose your family. And they just kind of write them off. And I don't think there's anything worse. I don't think that we can lead an intentional life and allow our family to be thrown behind. And so we need to be very intentional until they cause us to stumble with the kingdom. Then we need to choose the kingdom over family. But I want you to respond to this. And these are my thoughts. This is not perfectly thought out. I'm wrestling with it. Thirdly, let's talk about work And there's work in heaven. Adam and Eve in paradise on earth were given a task. I mean, Adam was before Eve came along, and he was told to name the animals, and they were to cultivate the soil and to a degree inside the garden. And then when they got kicked out of the garden, the job became a lot harder. But work is a part of paradise. And to think that we don't have to be productive is just wrong. And so I feel like we need to have a godly, kingdom oriented life. We need to be about productivity. And I actually really became successful because I built a really nice 55 plus community. One of the neatest ones in our county I did a number of years ago. It wasn't enormous, but I did super well at it. And I built 42 condominiums that were single level, and I put no stairs in the whole house. Had a nice clubhouse, and I had 16 really nice houses that were there, and of various size. They were like probably 1,700 to 2,400 square feet. Most of them were under 2,000, but a few were over 2,000. And so I watched all these people retire because they really sold well. But it took me a couple of years because I didn't have the resources then that I might now. And so it took me 3 years to build that out. So I got to know these people and I watched them retire. And most people don't retire very well. And most men don't have very many friends. And many people just live to have fun. And I didn't think that was very good. And there was a big difference. A quarter of the people retired really well with intentionality and productivity. A quarter did really poorly. My dad personally, my own dad, did not do very well. He was wrestling with Alzheimer's. He succumbed to it eventually. He had it for 19 years, which anybody that's been around it knows that's extremely long. Nobody had seen anybody that was adversely affected that long, but even when he had his wits, he did not lead an intentionally productive life. But he was a railroad engineer, and he knew it wasn't safe, and so it was actually important for him to quit because he was starting to struggle with controls and memory, and you have to do all this signaling and stuff when you're a railroad engineer. So it was responsible that he stopped, but he didn't lead an intentional life. He didn't read. He didn't do things. So some people don't retire well. They're not productive. They're going to regret that. As you come into wealth, you're going to have the option to not be productive. It's always a temptation. But I would encourage you and exhort you to determine to make a difference in other people's life, determine to serve them and do what you can. And you know what's really an interesting thing? I don't know, this just kind of came to me, but I've thought about it many times. Many people want to save serving other people for the future when they have the time, the resources, and it works for them. But just think about it. What if you didn't practice it and then all of a sudden you just dedicate a whole day to serve or to make a difference? If you don't leverage and gain the skill to do what your destiny involves, you can't just decide to turn it on. It's an accumulation of a number of things. Like, these 5 different people that I met with today. I didn't initiate these meetings. They requested, and I feel like what John Maxwell talks about is about adding added benefit to them, and they were willing to get together. And I wonder, who are you able to serve? Are you being productive? Are you being good for nothing, which is what we've talked about before on this channel? I want you to be good for nothing. What I feel like God is calling people to do is to be passionately good for nothing. It's so much more fun to do things that you want to do and not worried about how to get paid. But then I think, you want to get paid on your, investments. And I do want to talk about that. So I talked about friends, about how I think you're supposed to upgrade your friends and avoid those who don't influence you well, and maintain those that you do have influence over. With your family, you need to be totally loyal to your family. You need to be always reaching out. You need to be, making intentional outreaching. And I would encourage men to do what I started nearly coming up on 2 years ago now. I decided 22 months ago at Thanksgiving to begin to make a call to my son every week. And so we have missed a few times uh, a year where on Fridays we don't touch base for 15 minutes, but that's what we do. It's very intentional. And my relationship with my son has thrived since I have done that. And I'll just be candid. I don't do that with my daughter. I have a good relationship with my daughter. I call her and I ask her professional questions because she's works for a big advertising agency and she knows a lot of things about marketing and branding, and so she helps me in those regards, but I don't do it, and maybe I should. And I mean, that was one of the kind of inadequacies I had as a father. It was hard for me when my 8 or 9 year old, would snuggle with me and come and sit on me by the couch. But then when she got to be 12, I didn't know what to do with that. And so um, it's it's been easier for me to be close to my son, but I do feel like I have a highly functioning relationship with my daughter and her husband. But that's an interesting thing. I don't know. Maybe you have some opinions about how or what I should do. Maybe I should, begin texting. So the last thing is your outreach to the community. And I was born and raised in a church. I wasn't born in a church, but I was raised in where church was our culture. And I just don't think that's kingdom. I think that church is an important weekly tradition. I feel like time with God in the Bible is, and here's my journal, and there I have my tools right here. But I feel like the heart of God is that we need to be engaged in the community. Today, one of the people I met with was a political, I would say, influencer in town. And he's much older than me. And it's surprising, honestly, because I'd say he's 80. And he is still influential. And he asked if he could use some of my real estate to put up signs. And, he kind of got after me about how important, politics are in this crucial year. And I don't disagree, even though he and I don't agree on everything. But what I feel like is kingdom is you go to church on Sunday, but the other 6 days, and even the other time you're not in church, 6.5 days a week, you're ministering for the kingdom outside the walls of the church. And I just think that's what kingdom is. And I think Western Christianity is, and I was born in the Assemblies of God, born and raised in the Assemblies of God. We go to church on Sunday. We used to go to church on Sunday night. Then we go to church on Wednesday night. And our whole social calendar was all about church. And that was just what we did. I don't think that's kingdom. I think we need to take the gospel outside of the walls of the church, and I think that's the heart of God. And I see Kim Clement talk about that, and I feel like that's the heart of God, and it's what I want to encourage you guys to think about. So those four things: your relationship intentionally with your friends, with your family, with your productivity, your work, and your work, you don't have to make money. That doesn't have to be the center of everything. In fact, I believe that what God is saying is, I want to bless you financially here as you seek first the kingdom of God. You're going to be able to do, as you seek first the kingdom in whatever area you're called to, then I'm going to bless you with another part of your area of your life. And so you're going to be tremendously blessed, but you are going to seek first the kingdom of God, and maybe you don't need to get paid for that. So many people assume they need to get paid for the things they do. I believe, and I want you to prayerfully think about it, I don't think you need to get paid for everything. I think that it's important to learn and strive and say, God, I feel like you're calling me to be good for nothing. I want to serve people, not for money, but because that's what you're going to provide for me to do. And so those four areas are how you live out your faith: intentionally with your friends, intentionally with your family, intentionally with your productivity or work, and then finally intentionally with your community, some of which is inside the walls of the church, but most of it is outside the walls of the church, yet it's still kingdom. And I think that's a great way to live. And so I think that those are like four legs of a stool of where we live out our faith, and I think it's really important to do that. But I don't know. will you give me some feedback on what you think about those ideas? And I'm gonna kind of random. I'm gonna bounce around a little bit. I was surprised how many people had so many good questions about trust. When I was talking about trust, I was talking about if you don't have a significant, um, you know, I don't want to make people feel bad, but I think it's tens of thousands of dollars is not enough to create a trust, in my opinion. If you have hundreds of thousands of dollars, I don't know. I don't know why people do trusts. But I don't want to encourage people to do trusts just because a lot of people who are not godly people in the dinar, they talk about having trust. And that's what I was kind of reacting about. I do want to say this, and I've given this advice, and this is what we've done. I currently have 3 LLCs, and I talked about how my LLCs buy, my equipment or my tools, and those are write-offs. And one guy was kind of riding me because I'm rich, and so I must not pay enough taxes, and he has no idea. Um, what I have done is I have each big asset is in an LLC. And so I have one for my storage company, one for my smaller apartment complex, and then I have a third LLC. And I thought this was a really good idea, and I think this is a really good idea for you guys. And in my opinion, if you have maybe more than 5 to 10 homes in a group, then I think it's worth maintaining an LLC for that. And so if you only have 2 or 3 homes, I don't think you need an LLC. If you have more than 5, I think you might. If you have more than 10, you should. And so, but what we did is we used an attorney who's now retired. I thought about calling him and getting some advice on this, but I asked questions to my CPA, and so we said that the company that had bought this land for, we paid $1 million for 26 acres inside the city limits, and it's a really great piece of land, and it's a big multifamily piece of land, and we're really fortunate to have it. I wanted my kids in the future to be able to benefit from it. I would have thought they already would have been. The problem is we never got to finish this asset. But the smart thing that we did is the way that we paid for this, we had a lot of equity, and so we pulled it into our company. We gave a loan to ourselves, and so we assigned some of that money to the kids. So we assigned 10. We loaned each kid $100,000, and then they made an investment into the company. And you don't have to do it at that level, but we had already had the piece of property before I thought about it, and so we had to kind of go about it this way. But there was a lot of advantages for the kids to have up to 10% ownership, and there's not a lot of liability. But then we could distribute the income, and they could make, really great income. And this property is approved for over 300 units. So when we get it built, I mean, it's 10% of it is a great living in really anybody's perspective. The reason I say that is I would encourage you to think about an LLC. So I just want to encourage you that you might want to think about having an LLC where you have your kids and then they are investors into your LLC. And I think you could do that if you started with only $10,000, and then you could lend the LLC money, and then as the profit was made, if they were an investor of $1,000, then they would be 10% owners. There's not a lot of extended liability if you're only 10% owner. If you're a majority owner, a member, honestly, when you're an LLC, at least in Washington State. And so I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I've done. And I really think that I'm very happy that we did that. The thing is, I've got 3 LLCs. 2 of them do really well each month. And then the one that the kids are a part of, that doesn't make cash flow. It just sits there. We have this big piece of property paid for, and it doesn't make money, and it really hardly loses money because we don't have to pay a lot of taxes on it. But I think that was an idea that I would encourage you to think about how you could use an LLC to share future income with your kids, because I feel like we've got a responsibility to teach our kids how to steward, and we need, to be multi-generational, but the skills of managing money are more important than them actually having the money. And I think that many kids are not going to be benefited if they don't want to work with it. Then I don't know that they should get it. And so I don't know what your opinions are about that. I just threw a lot of things out there. What I would like you to do, if you wouldn't mind, is giving me a lot of feedback on what you would be curious about for the future, because I'd appreciate if you would rate and review my existing book on Amazon. But what questions do you have as we go into the wealth transfer that I could study and I could articulate? And, these ideas of how to view friendships, I think that's kind of unique, and I think some people would be offended by it. But I think if somebody was a disciple of Jesus and he pulled them out of their community and they traveled the countryside, think about what difference that made in their friendships. They were pulled in with a group of like-minded people, and they probably had the three, the 12, the 70, and the 120. And so I think that in Christian community, those are things we should do. I've thought about my mentoring groups in the future. I'm not going to try to make a bunch of money off of it. I mean, I think it will cover my costs to get out there or whatever, but I want to do mentoring opportunities where you have people. I want you to be able to have access to me. To be honest, I don't really enjoy talking to people that I don't know, but I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of people. So I know it's frustrating that people reach out, and I don't necessarily enjoy, reaching out like that. I've done it and it's been fun, but I don't really want to do that. But I can't wait till we can have, 100 people, or 50 people, or even 20 people who want to meet. We're going to meet in Kansas City, and then we're going to, in the next quarter, we're going to meet in Hawaii, and we're going to go skiing in Colorado or whatever. Who knows how that will go. I'd like to have your ideas on those things. And, give me some ideas for what to write about and even to talk about, because I know what it's like to steward 8 digits worth of resources. But the thing is, I know I don't know everything. And I don't like to act like I know what I'm talking about when I don't know everything. And so, but I think that if somebody's ahead and they have a heart that you respect, I think it's very beneficial, because mentors don't know everything. They just might know a little bit more. And I can't mentor in every area, but I think in this wealth transfer, I think that's what I'm called to do. And I think even stewarding wealth and how to set it up in your family, it's an important thing to do it well. So I threw a lot out there. I wanted to get a video. I want to start getting towards 2 a week again, and I want to do that. I kind of got myself, stuck for a while, but this one is very impromptu. I just kind of let it ramble. But please comment, give me direction. I do read the comments. I am praying for you guys, and I pray that you'll have wisdom, and that you'll really find the grace of God sweet, and you'll seek Him early in the morning, and that things will go well with you, with your friends, with your family, with your work, and with your community, and what you're called to do, how you're called to be a kingdom person in every one of those regards. Have a great one.